I appreciate it.
This is Lewis Holt for Boxing Social in association with Empire Fight Store and William Hill. I'm delighted today. He's back on the channel. Delighted to join with Dan Rafael. How are we, mate?
I'm doing good, Lewis. It's great to be with you today.
I'm all the better for seeing you, mate. It's been a big weekend this past weekend, especially sort of in the UK shores. We saw Anthony Joshua come back. Obviously, we saw Robeisy Ramirez claim the WBO featherweight title as well, beating Isaac Dogbo. But there's no better place to start than Anthony Joshua. First of all, first question. It's a pretty simple one, but what was your sort of overall thoughts on the performance?
Well, first and foremost, my first thought is, you know what? Good for him. He got the W. He got the win, much needed after two losses in a row. He had to get that win, or there really would be a lot of questions, fair or unfair, about the future of his career. So the most important thing was handled. He got the victory. He showed that he was in great condition. He was at the heaviest weight he's ever been at, 255 pounds, but he looked as good as he's ever looked in terms of his body, just in tremendous physical condition. Look, he's still got a lot of great tools in that toolbox of his. He's got a great jab. He's got the size. He understands sort of the distance, how he was leaning on his opponent, Jermaine Franklin, when necessary. And he did show some toughness when he got tagged. So those are the sort of the good things. And it felt like watching the back and forth between him and his trainer, Derrick James, between rounds, that they've got some connection going, which is good. Granted, it's only been one fight and one training camp. So those are all definitely positive signs. Win being the most important. On the negative side, when you watch Joshua fight, and this is not my own. I'm not like I'm the only person that thinks this. It's, to me, it's very clear that he's still a little gun shy. You know what I mean? He just doesn't. He knows that he has issues if he's going to get hit with a clean shot. I think, and it's got to be in his mind. And I think his whatever issues he's working through is more mental than physical. But he's just not the same fighter that he was. I think he probably realizes that, and it's a process. The question is, can he ever get that back? History would tell you probably not. You never say never, but he's going to have some work to do, either in the gym or with his mind. But the biggest thing was he got the win pretty handily, by the way. Scorecards were pretty wide, and it was fair scoring. It wasn't like Jermaine Franklin was somehow robbed or anything. Could give him 2 rounds, maybe 3 rounds. But he's going to have to do a lot more if he's going to think about having victories against the likes of a Tyson Fury, a Deontay Wilder, a Joe Joyce, the other top level heavyweights.
Yeah, I was going to say that, I was going to talk to you about the scoring, just sort of because Franklin said, he said, oh, after 6, he thought it was 4-2 up. I'm not really too sure about that, but you said you probably thought it was quite fair scoring as the rounds went by. Thought they were a bit nip and tuck each round.
No, the rounds, each of the rounds, at least in the first half of the fight, it seems to me, the rounds themselves were competitive, but at the end, the judge has to give it to one or the other. And I think that's one thing sometimes lost on some boxing fans, is that if you see a scorecard at the end of a fight that says, let's say it was, 10 rounds to 2, and it's like, wow, that was a complete blowout. But if you actually watch the fight, those 10 rounds that may have all gone to one particular fighter could all be competitive, as could the 2 rounds that the other fighter had. But just that one judge saw something in the style or the way that the one person was fighting that they decided to give it to that particular fighter. So I have seen, it's not common, but I've seen fights where you could perhaps even score a shutout. But if you actually watch the fight, you'd be like, man, every single round was competitive. You just kept giving every single round to one particular fighter. So in this case, Jermaine Franklin made a lot of the rounds competitive, but it seemed pretty clear that when the round was over and the bell rang, that you got to give the round to Joshua, who was more active with his punching, landed many more punches. Look, I'm a person that doesn't live and die by the CompuBox. They're the people that count the punches, but I respect what they do. They've got decades of history doing it. It clearly shows the sort of the way a fight goes, not in terms of the power behind a punch, but just in the raw numbers of the totals. And in the fight with Joshua and Franklin, according to their statistics, Joshua landed just over double the punches that Franklin landed. And that doesn't matter if they're spread out over 1 round or 12 rounds. The bottom line is, if you double up your opponent in punches landed and there's no knockout, chances are you're going to win the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said there about AJ being gun shy, and you still feel like he's gun shy. What I was going to ask you is, where do you feel like AJ is mentally at? Because we sort of saw, obviously, in the second Usyk fight, we saw that outburst, on the mic. Then even after the Franklin fight, we saw, sort of a weird interaction at the end where he was leaning on Franklin, then got into sort of a bit of a spat with Lorenzo Reynolds. after the back-to-back Usyk defeats and the AJ Andy Ruiz knockout, where would you say you feel like AJ is at mentally? It's a big thing that's always talked about.
Sure. I mean, to me, whatever issues, for lack of a better word, that he has, I said it before. I feel like it's much more, up here than in his physical abilities or in his desire, or his heart, or anything like that. I don't doubt that he still has a desire to be a great fighter and wants to get in there and do his thing. Even though he's made astronomical amounts of money, it's not like he has to do this for the money anymore. I know he likes the money. Look, who doesn't? But if he retires tomorrow, he and generations of Joshuas to come are going to be set for life. But the mental part is a big thing, and so I think that that he felt the pressure maybe a little bit of the moment. I mean, how important that fight was to his career, and there was a lot of holding going on by both fighters during the course of the fight. And I don't know really what happened there at the end. I think it was sort of like you pop a balloon and the air goes out, and he was sort of like relieved and it was over, and he knew he was going to get the win, and that was sort of his way of showing that. One thing I actually noticed that I actually kind of liked, frankly, was when they read the scores and he had his hand raised and was the winner of the fight. You didn't see Anthony Joshua doing any kind of wild celebrations. It was business. He got what he came to do a job. 100%. He did the job, however it went. It's not quite the same thing. It reminded me, I'll maybe date myself a little bit because I'm a little older than you. So I remember watching when Mike Tyson knocked out Michael Spinks to become the undisputed lineal heavyweight champion. And Mike Tyson sort of like expected that was to be the case. You think a guy just won a huge fight, biggest money fight in the history of the sport at that time. And he didn't celebrate. He just went like this with his arms like, what did you expect? So I felt like that was good from Joshua's point of view, that, he didn't overestimate like his performance, and, he knew that he did what he had to do, and it's on to the next.
Yeah. Do you feel like a part of the pressure can be potentially, you have, I think I always say this, especially in sort of the UK, AJ is one of these people where every single sort of person has an opinion on what he should and shouldn't do. And do you feel like sometimes someone like, I know you don't speak for him, but someone like AJ, where he's clouded with all these thoughts, that sometimes he does struggle with all the pressure and all the pressures that come with him, and him being sort of the poster boy for the UK, with that comes a lot of stress for him, would you say?
I'm not sure if I'd say it's stress, but he does live in a fishbowl, so to speak, and when he's in the UK, which is one of the reasons why I thought it was a great move from him and his team to have him relocate to do his training camp with Derrick in Texas, in his Dallas gym. I'm not sure if that was part of the deal with Derrick, where he has other fighters that he works with, and wasn't in a position maybe to pack up and go spend 6 or 7 weeks or 8 weeks in London training Anthony Joshua. Remember, he's the trainer also of Charlo, the undisputed junior middleweight champion. He's the trainer of Errol Spence, who's got 3 of the welterweight titles. He trains the young unbeaten lightweight up and comer Frank Martin. And these guys, they've got their own careers going on, and they're all based, and they come to Derrick. And I think that Joshua was I think it was a great thing for him to go and get out of the spotlight for a little while, where if you're in London and Joshua wants to go get a cup of coffee, he's not going to be able to move freely. If he's in Dallas, Texas, maybe there's some people that might recognize him. They might even think he's an athlete, but frankly, most of them will think he's a member of the Dallas Cowboys, not a professional heavyweight boxer. So that was good. So I think mentally that's a good thing for him. And, he's been dealing with this for many years. I mean, he was at the top level in the amateurs, winning a gold medal. You're in the spotlight. Certainly he had a huge amount of attention to him when he turned professional, getting into a world championship fight in the first, 15 or 16 fights of his career. So it's not anything he's not used to, but it doesn't mean it still doesn't get to him at times. And I feel like all things considered, he's done a pretty decent job of handling it since the losses.
Yeah. What did you make of this did you see improvements with his style of Derrick James? It's a link up that I've always sort of wanted from a while, where you look at the likes of Charlo, Martin, and, Spence. They're all sort of, very, very tailor-made for an aggressive style, and that could suit Anthony Joshua. Would you say that we saw a lot of improvements with James on Saturday night?
I mean, I can't say that I saw improvements. I mean, I'm not a trainer. I've certainly watched enough boxing to see certain things, but I didn't see anything that really stood out to me. I thought that he did a very good job of utilizing his jab, which is something that he's always been good at. But I also was of the opinion that even though he lost the rematch to Usyk, I felt like his union in that fight with Robert Garcia, who I hold in high esteem, as I do Derrick James, I thought that the way that Garcia had him in that fight, he performed much, much better against Usyk in the second fight than he did in the first fight. Part of that has to be attributed to the trainer. And I thought that Derrick James also, who's obviously got a great reputation. He's the reigning trainer of the year, a well-deserved award that has eluded him in the past. But I don't know if I could pinpoint a specific thing he did so much better. But the one thing that he definitely did was, whether it was in his own mind or was that Derrick was preaching it to him round after round, was he worked behind the jab, and that's a very important, if not the most important weapon. He did go to the body a little bit more than I've used to see Joshua do so, if my memory is correct. So, there's definitely a foundation for the two of those guys to work on. Remember, they haven't really been together that long, so it takes time. I've heard fighters tell me many times over the years that you can change trainers. It might take you 3-4 fights before you're really truly comfortable. They've had like a few months together in one fight.
Absolutely, yeah. So it goes on to sort of what I was going to say. What do you believe would be next for Anthony Joshua? You earlier said that it's a bit too soon for potentially like a Joe Joyce, a Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury was a name that he called out. What do you believe is next for him, and how long do you feel that he needs with Derrick James before he potentially looks at potentially massive fights?
Well, I don't think it's too soon for Tyson Fury. I think that the stage of Anthony's career, you have two things you can look at. One, are you truly going to want to go through, and I won't call it a rebuilding process, but as you said, sort of like, let me gel better with my trainer, let me work on a few things. I mean, he is 33. It's not like he's 24, a young kid. So, could he do a Dylan White rematch, which would probably be a popular fight in the UK? They had a very good first fight, even though it was very one-sided in Joshua's favor. But that's not going to pay even close to the kind of money of Fury. So to me, at this point in his career, with the title on the line, he made a very vocal point in his post-fight comments. And then I also saw his post-fight press conference, about the importance and the significance it would mean to him to not only have the big fight, but to win the WBC title. It's the one belt that he has not won of the four major organizations so far. So I think if the Fury fight is there, you have to take it, because the combination of the opportunity to get that title you've never had, the magnitude of the event, and certainly, obviously, the huge amount of money that goes with it compared to any other fight that he could possibly have. So if it's there, hopefully they'll do it. The fact is, Fury's got nothing going right now. He doesn't have a mandatory deal with the WBC. The Usyk fight is dead. Matter of fact, as we tape this on Monday, the WBA just earlier today ordered officially, as we knew they would, but they finally sent the official letter to put the clock on a fight between Usyk and Daniel Dubois. So they have X number of days to negotiate, or they'll call a purse bid. Point is, there won't be a Fury Usyk fight next unless some miracle happened and Usyk gave up the WBA title. Not going to happen. Point is, the biggest fight out there for Tyson Fury and for Anthony Joshua is them to fight each other. And by the way, if you're Tyson and Fury, I think you'd be crazy not to pursue that fight in a serious manner, not the stupid manner sometimes that Fury does things in terms of how he approaches his opponents. But you have to love his chances in the fight based on the way he's been fighting. And, all due respect to Joshua, the way that he looked in this fight, he enough to beat Jermaine Franklin. I'm not sure that's enough to beat Tyson Fury. So that's the fight that should happen next. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer. I'm not the only one that thinks that.
Yeah. Well, another name that he also that AJ had on his lips was someone like Joe Joyce. And I asked this question in another interview yesterday, and I said, would Joe Joyce be a sensible fight for Anthony Joshua to take, where the reward or the risk ratio is a lot higher with someone compared to Tyson Fury, where Joyce hasn't got as much market value as Fury has, but Joyce has got probably as best a chance as Fury does of potentially beating AJ, with the momentum that he's got and the sort of the streak that he's on right now.
Would you? I mean, look, when I talked to Joshua, we did a Zoom call for an interview before he fought Jermaine Franklin, the week before the fight. And at the end of the interview, we were talking about, the future, should he take care of his business against Franklin, we discussed a little on the possibility of Fury and Wilder. And then he's the one that mentioned, and there's a third guy, Joe Joyce. Well, I can appreciate, Anthony's interest and desire to fight the best guys. And if you look at his record, by the way, no one can say that, Anthony Joshua is a guy that ducks and dodges and avoids fights. He's fought a lot of good fighters over the years. So I think in his heart, he believes that. But honestly, his team and everybody around him, and I think if Joshua takes him in and has a deep thought about it, and I think Joe Joyce is a terrific heavyweight. Why would you fight Joe Joyce? There's nothing to gain. I mean, he doesn't need the WBO interim title. As you said, extremely hard fight. I'd have to pick Joyce in that fight. Really tough fight. Not even close to the kind of money for Fury. So if you're going to put yourself in a position where you're in a fight where, it can go either way, you might lose, whatever, why wouldn't you take the biggest possible fight, not only for the money, but for the glory? You beat Tyson Fury. It's a much bigger win in terms of the public opinion and on your legacy, on your resume, way bigger than a Joe Joyce win at this stage of their career. So, Joyce, to me, it's nice that he gave him a little bit of attention and exposure and put his name out there. But to me, that's just an unrealistic fight. I mean, they've had so many problems between Matchroom and Frank Warren making fights, it's hard enough to make, any of these fights. The Fury fight, though, is the one that makes sense for everybody. I mean, obviously, he's with Matchroom, and Fury and Joyce are both there. But if you're going to deal with Frank Warren, why wouldn't you go for the big fight, not the secondary fight?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think many people can sort of disagree with you there, Dan. Moving on slightly, Conor Benn was situated. He's seen for the first time since October, last Saturday, watching the AJ fight. He also came out with a statement yesterday saying that his next fight's going to be June 3rd. It's 100%. They're waiting on an opponent. Potentially, it could be Chris Eubank Jr. First of all, I just wanted your thoughts on that potential fight with Chris Eubank Jr. in Abu Dhabi, and then further on, I'll ask you probably more questions like, what about the fight?
I mean, look, the whole thing is just rotten. I mean, I can't blame Chris Eubank if they're going to go pay him a ton of money to do the fight. He was willing to do it the first time around. I don't know if they've come up with a better situation in terms of what the weight would be. But to me, Chris Eubank has no business being in a boxing ring until his situation is clarified in terms of his PED situation. Yeah. And he can run around.
You mean Conor Benn? Sorry.
I'm sorry. Conor Benn.
Right.
Yeah, my bad. Conor, I don't want to put that on anybody else, but Conor Benn can run around and tell everybody in the world that he's been cleared, and that's just simply not true. What happened in terms of the quote unquote clearing is that the WBC says that in its investigation they couldn't find any evidence that Conor Benn took a substance knowingly, and I may be one of the few people that's actually read the WBC rules of their clean boxing program. Keep in mind, we're talking about two different positive tests from two different situations, not one that was tested in camp and then a few days later another test and it came back. These are months apart. One was under the auspices of the WBC's clean boxing program, which is run by VADA, but a separate and totally different testing situation. And then there was the one that came out in the lead up to the fight, the week of the fight, which was done under the VADA program. They also ran this one, but it wasn't related to the WBC program that Conor Benn and Chris Eubank hired VADA to do as a testing program for the fight. That's the one that caused the fight to be canceled. So the WBC may have taken a look at both of the situations, but they concluded that he didn't knowingly do it. And like I said, I have read their rules, and in their rules, they don't make a distinction between knowingly and unknowing, or I'm sorry, they do make a distinction between knowingly and unknowingly. In other words, they don't subscribe to the notion of strict liability. Strict liability means however the substance got in your system is not relevant. It's that it was there and now you're in trouble. The WBC's rules make it that if they conclude that it's not knowingly, then it's not going to be grounds for some kind of major punishment. So they put him back in the ratings. That's hardly an endorsement that you've been cleared. So that's got nothing to do with the fact that he had it in his system twice, separate and apart from each test. And neither one has been explained in a way that I think anybody at the board or in the media or the public, anybody finds credible. So the fact that he would be licensed to go and do a fight outside of the British jurisdiction without having cleared up his situation, I think is just a terrible look for the whole entire sport. I mean, it's on Conor Benn and his team and Matchroom and all that, but it does reflect on the sport as a whole, and it's unfortunate.
Absolutely. That sort of goes on to the sort of next thing, as you just alluded to there. Do you feel like morally and ethically it's wrong for Matchroom to even talk about, fights outside of the UK with Conor Benn, where the investigation still hasn't been, there's still so many questions that everyone has. And ethically and morally, do you have to sort of look at Eddie Hearn and Matchroom and be like, you have to question it with moving forward with the Conor Benn fight?
100% yes. Now, that said, I mean, I've been around a long time. Very rarely in my career have I heard the words ethics and morality us when it comes to a boxing business deal. So I am, not trying to look through everything through my rose-colored glasses, but there should be some kind of line. And it is, I don't think that he should be fighting. And I'm not saying he should never fight again. I think he should take care of his situation. Whatever the professionals, the scientists, and the people that their jobs are to do these investigations, talk to everybody, figure it out. It'd be nice if the Benn camp had some transparency, which they haven't from day one. I have said this before. I will say it again. To me, this is the way that Conor Benn and his team have handled this. Is if I was teaching a class in how not to handle this type of situation, I would just show them what Conor Benn has been doing for the last few months and say, don't do that, because every single thing that he has done and his team has done has been wrong, in my opinion. And, it's unfortunate because if he had just been, forthright and dealt with it, even if he took a suspension, the clock would be ticking and, he would be able eventually to carry on with his career. I mean, look, I've covered lots of guys that have failed drug tests. They've taken suspensions. They've come back to fight another day. And most people, they may not forget, but they forgive and you get another chance. Conor Benn's digging himself a deeper hole every day. And if this fight goes through in Abu Dhabi against whichever opponent he faces, I think that's going to just reflect poorly on him for a long time to come because he still will not have worked out his situation and he's still not going to be licensed by the board. And here's the thing, maybe you can go do a big fight in Abu Dhabi, make a good payday, put on a big event. But you're not going to be able to go back to Abu Dhabi for the next, however many years of your career. You may be able to do a fight here, a fight there, but his base is in the United Kingdom. His base is at home. And if you don't have a license at home, you got no career. Now, I know here in the United States, for example, the Association of Boxing Commissions, which is oversees all the various state and tribal commissions. They can't make a commission do it, but they have an affiliation and they basically follow what the ABC says. There's occasionally a rogue commission, fair enough, but they have said to the different commissions, do not license him, if he tries to come here because of that situation. I know, in Nevada, for example, where Las Vegas is, which is the big boxing state here in this country, they would not in any way, shape, or form license a fighter like Conor Benn who's having issues with his home commission. And I'm pretty sure the same would be said for the big boxing states like New York and New Jersey and California and Florida and Texas, etc. My point is, so fine, you're going to be able to go do a one-off in Abu Dhabi. Wonderful. Go cash your check because you're going to need that money for a while because you're not going to be able to fight in a lot of other places. And frankly, outside of the occasional fight there, there's no other market for a Conor Benn fight except in the UK. And if you can't fight there, you got nothing.
Do you feel like the board are right in saying with their comments, of Robert Smith was right in saying his comments that he didn't want to sanction Eubank Jr. to fight, a Benn fight in Abu Dhabi, and he also said that he hoped that the Abu Dhabi board or whoever sanctioned those sorts of fights would make a sensible option and they wouldn't sanction that fight. Do you feel like that's a completely right thing for Robert Smith to say?
I didn't see those exact comments, but if as you're saying it, then that makes sense to me. I mean, that shouldn't be the case. And honestly, the board's going to have a problem with the promoters and the fighters that aren't Chris Eubank, or that aren't Conor Benn or Eddie Hearn, because whatever fighter, whether it's Eubank and his team or some other fighter, they know they're going into a fight that does not have the blessing of the British board, and especially if it's another British fighter. Like, for example, if it is Chris Eubank, it would seem to me that he'll have a problem with the board coming home for his next fight after basically breaking their rules in a sense of going outside of their commission to do this fight. The whole thing just stinks to high heaven.
Yeah. Do you feel like there has to be potentially some responsibility on Eubank Jr., if he's the one that wants to take the fight at the end of the day? I know he's a fighter and he'll fight anyone, but he wants to take the fight at the end of the day. So, what really as fans, as journalists and, as promoters, what can we do if he's the one that wants to take it?
Well, I mean, last I knew was his team had stated 100% that he had elected to exercise his rematch option with Liam Smith. So I felt like that meant he's now contractually bound to a Liam Smith rematch. Now, I don't know the minutia of that contract and if there was an out or if he'd actually done it in a formal manner, but it seems to me, your word should mean something. He said, I want the rematch and I'm exercising my rematch option with Liam Smith. Feels like that should be the right fight. I mean, I get it, the fact that there's more money involved in a Conor Benn fight. I can only speak for myself. Money is not always the only thing. For some people it is. And I feel that if Eubank does take the fight and goes outside the British rules and regulations and goes to Abu Dhabi to do this match, it's going to reflect poorly on him also. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah.
There's no good answer. What the answer is Ben's got to come forward and be honest with the commission. Deal with it. Whatever the punishment is, take it and move on with your life. But to just drag it out like this and do things that are just digging you a deeper hole because you might get one big payday out of it, to me, doesn't seem worth it to have that tatter your reputation for the rest of your life, frankly.
Yeah, I spoke to like Team Wasserman and Team Sauerland, last week, and discussed about the potential Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn fight. And they said to me, I spoke about the Liam Smith, and obviously they approved the rematch clause. But what they said to me is said they've had a flirt, but there was nothing to sort of confirm. So I don't know where it lies between a Smith rematch or a Conor Benn fight. I mean, I'll be speaking.
I just know Eubank was on his social media saying, "I'm doing the rematch."
Yeah.
He said it to the world. He didn't just say it to somebody in an office or something like that. And again, from a technical point of view, is he contractually bound legally? All that, maybe not. But I don't know. I live my life where your word should mean something.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, let's move on to something more positive. We saw, a great performance this weekend from Robeisy Ramirez. Since he took his sort of first loss on his pro debut, a brilliant performance on against Isaac Dogbo this weekend. I just wanted sort of your thoughts on that whole performance.
Yeah, no, that was a very good performance. It didn't surprise me. I mean, that was sort of the fight went. It's kind of how I spoke about it beforehand. Where Dogbe is a very good fighter, also former 122-pound world champion, former Olympian. Uh, but that Ramirez was just at a different level in terms of his overall skills. A little bit of a bigger guy, with the deep amateur pedigree, and the fact that he was a southpaw, the left hand just was pinpoint the whole fight. And Dogbe just couldn't get away from it. And a straight left hand, left cross, an uppercut, whatever it was, he just could not get away from the left. And even when it seemed like he might make a slight adjustment, Ramirez for his trouble gave him a right hook. I mean, it was a very complete performance when he needed it most at the top level. I mean, when he lost his pro debut, that was a gargantuan upset. That was unheard of. I mean, an Olympic medalist, a gold medalist, a two-time gold medalist, you're not supposed to lose your pro debut. He didn't lose. He got knocked down, clearly was the loser on points, only a 4-rounder, but still that was as shocking as it gets. And you're sort of like, wow, maybe this guy's not all that. And it was a rebuilding process. He says that, in retrospect, it wasn't maybe necessarily the worst thing ever because it led him to the union that he now has with his trainer, Ishmael Salas, who was also a top Cuban amateur coach before he came to the United States and started training professionals and has a good reputation. And he found him and feels like that was the biggest thing in the world for him in terms of getting to where he's gotten. So, you can look back now a couple of years later and feel like it was not the end of the world. And now he's got a world title. And the thing I sort of feel like is pretty cool, and I consider myself a little bit of a student of boxing history, and they also mentioned this on the ESPN broadcast of the fight on Saturday. It's not a common thing, but there are fighters who've lost their pro debuts who've gone on to do great things. Now, I don't know if Robeisy Ramirez is going to be down in the future as an all-time great. I don't know if he's going to be in the Hall of Fame someday, but there are some great fighters who lost their professional debuts who not only went on to do what Ramirez did by winning a world championship, but by becoming a Hall of Famer. Benny Leonard, Henry Armstrong, who some people think is number 2 all-time on the pound-for-pound list, Bernard Hopkins, the Marquez brothers, Rafael and Juan Manuel, they all lost their pro debuts. They all went on to become significant world champions and Hall of Famers. So Ramirez, he got over that hump and he looked really good. What can I say? He looked really, really good, and he brings another dimension to a very interesting featherweight division that's now got 4 different champions of the major organizations, and each one of them hasn't really been in the division that long, and each one of them has things going for them. And I'd love to see those guys get it on with each other.
Yeah, I was literally just about to say, where would you look at the featherweight world title picture? We've got on May 27th, you've got Luis Alberto Lopez versus Michael Conlon. Then also we've got the rematch between Leigh Wood and Mauricio Lara. That's in Manchester. Where would you sort of look at this featherweight, title picture at the time where there's potential for some massive unifications?
Well, the thing that's interesting is there's no clear-cut number one. I mean, you mentioned you've got the Leigh Wood rematch with Mauricio Lara. That's going to be on the 27th. The same day in Belfast is Lopez versus Conlon. So there's 4 of the top, 6, let's say, or so featherweights out there. You've got Ray Vargas, who's got the WBC title. Now, he is coming off of a loss, but that was when he went up and tried to challenge for the title at junior lightweight. So he's back at 126 now, still as the WBC's champion, and he's the veteran of the group, but hasn't really held the featherweight title for very long. And now you have Robeisy Ramirez throwing his hat into the ring, so to speak. And so there's a lot of interesting fights. Now, obviously, a lot of it sometimes has to do with promotional entities and broadcasters. So from that standpoint, in terms of what's easy to make and what could probably be done in a reasonable manner, would be Ramirez against the winner of the fight between Conlon and Lopez, since they're all with Top Rank. I don't think that's going to be next. Ramirez will probably take some other fight, let's say this summer. And he mentioned in his post-fight interview Joet Gonzalez, maybe only because Joet, who has fought for the title a couple of times and is a tough guy and, been in some excellent fights, maybe not the most skilled guy in the world, but brings it every time. But he's also with Top Rank. He won the co-feature underneath the Ramirez victory. So that may be a fight that Top Rank would consider. But I think you're right. There are some very interesting matchups, particularly as it relates to the winner of Lopez Conlon and obviously Lara Wood is on the Matchroom side of things, and then Ramirez is there also. So I suspect, though, that the winner of that fight between Mauricio Lara and Leigh Wood, that rematch, the winner, Eddie Hearn's already said that they're probably going to end up fighting a fight with Warrington. But that's okay, because it just keeps the interesting activity. You know, you'd like to see the unifications, but as long as there's good fights taking place without them, as opposed to a guy just, ducking and trying to avoid those tough fights, I don't have a problem with them letting it play out for a little while. These are not less, guys that have huge profiles. They still need to build themselves up a little bit. And the health of the featherweight division at the moment, from a fan point of view, is very good, because there's lots of interesting matchups with guys who make good fights. But I thought Ramirez did a great job the other night.
Absolutely, mate. I agree. Well, Dan, it's absolutely been a pleasure to talk to you today. It's good to sort of be joined with you for the first time over Zoom. I will link your newsletter in the description if you just want to give it a little shout out on what you're doing over there.
I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I work with my good friends at the Big Fight Week, the BigFightWeekend.com, but I also am the publisher of the Fight Freaks Unite Substack newsletter. If anybody wants to get that, they can just go on the website, danrafael.substack.com. They can either read that, or, if better yet, put your email in, and you'll get my posts just come right to you, either via email or via a phone alert. And we have a lot of good posts, and I'm writing pretty much every day and having a good time.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, it's been a pleasure talking to you, mate. Hopefully catch up soon. I appreciate your time, mate. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Lewis. I appreciate it.